There's a moment from that block party I still can't shake. The second right before Grant Whitmore's face lost every bit of color it had. It was the last Saturday of June, the kind of evening where the whole street smelled like charcoal and sunscreen, and half of Maple Hollow was packed into the Whitmore's driveway with paper plates and lawn chairs. I was standing near the dessert table, holding a plate of brownies I'd stayed up till midnight baking, when Denise Whitmore turned to the group of neighbors beside her and said it loud enough that even the kids stopped chasing each other for a second. "Natalie thinks she's something special because she drives that little car and works from home," she said, tilting her cup toward me without quite looking at me. "Must be nice, playing pretend at a real job while the rest of us actually leave the house." A couple of people laughed. Not everyone, but enough. My neighbor Carla gave me a sympathetic look from across the yard. The kind that says, "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to say anything either." I just stood there holding my brownies, feeling my face go warm in that particular way it does when you're trying very hard not to react. I didn't say anything back. I never did. Denise had been doing this for almost 2 years. Little comments at the mailbox, little jokes at community meetings, little digs disguised as jokes whenever enough people were around to laugh with her instead of at her. I'd learned it was easier to just let it roll past me than to explain myself to someone who'd already decided who I was. What none of them knew, what Denise had never once bothered to ask, was about to walk straight into that driveway in the shape of her own husband. My name is Natalie Pierce, and I've spent 11 years building something quietly. The kind of quietly where you don't correct people when they assume you're just tinkering around on a laptop for fun. I let Denise think what she wanted. I let the whole street think what they wanted. There's a strange kind of peace in being underestimated, if you can stomach it long enough. I set my plate down on the folding table and reached for a napkin, and that's when I heard footsteps coming up the driveway behind me. Slow, a little uneven, like someone who'd just seen something they weren't ready for. I turned around, and there was Grant, Denise's husband, standing at the edge of the driveway with his phone still in his hand and an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Not confusion, not embarrassment, something closer to disbelief, the kind that drains the color right out of a person's face before they've even said a word. "Natalie," he said, and his voice came out smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Is this you?" He turned the phone toward me, and across the driveway, I watched Denise's smile falter for the first time in 2 years. Like she already sensed, before she understood why, that something in her evening had just quietly come apart. I didn't answer him right away. I just looked at the phone in his hand, my heart doing something strange and slow, because I already knew what was probably on that screen before I even saw it. "Grant," I said carefully, "what are you looking at?" He turned the screen toward me fully now, and his hand was shaking just slightly. It was an article, one I recognized instantly because I'd written half the language in it myself 2 years earlier. The headline read, "Local entrepreneur Natalie Pierce's software company secures Series B funding, now valued at $40 million. Beneath it was a photo of me from a conference in Austin, standing at a podium in a blazer instead of the faded sundress I was wearing right now, holding a plate of brownies in someone else's driveway. "This is you," Grant said again, not a question this time. "This is actually you." Behind him, I heard Denise's cup hit the folding table a little too hard. She hadn't come over yet. She was still standing exactly where she'd been when she made her comment, watching her husband's face with the particular stillness of someone whose evening has just tilted sideways without her permission. I'd started the company almost 11 years earlier, back when I was 24 and working out of a spare bedroom in a duplex 2 towns over, teaching myself things out of library books because I couldn't afford the classes that would have taught me faster. Nobody on Maple Hollow knew any of that. When my husband Ryan and I moved here 4 years ago, I'd made a conscious decision not to lead with it. I'd watched what happened to friends who did. The sudden politeness that wasn't really politeness. The way people start performing around you instead of just talking to you. I wanted neighbors, not an audience. So when people asked what I did, I said I worked in software, which was true, and let them fill in the rest however they wanted. Most filled it in small. A few filled it in the way Denise had. Data entry, maybe. Something to fill the hours while Ryan's paycheck did the real work. I never corrected any of it. There didn't seem to be a version of the truth that wouldn't change how people looked at me. And honestly, I liked how they looked at me before they knew. I saw it because my brother sent it to me 20 minutes ago, Grant said, still holding the phone like it might change its answer if he looked at it long enough. "He works in fintech. He follows this stuff." He said, "Isn't that your neighbor?" And I thought he had the wrong person because he stopped himself, glancing back toward Denise for half a second before looking at me again. Something apologetic settling into his face. "Because what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Because Denise always said you didn't really do much." he said quietly. I didn't think it was true. I'm sorry, Natalie. I really didn't. I looked past him at Denise, who hadn't moved, who was staring at us both like she was trying to work out whether the ground beneath her had actually shifted or whether she'd simply misheard something important. She hadn't misheard anything. Not yet. But she was about to hear a great deal more than she wanted to. Denise finally crossed the driveway, moving slower than her usual confident walk. Like each step was costing her something. She stopped beside Grant and looked at the phone screen herself, and I watched her read it twice. Her lips moving slightly, the way people do when they're trying to make words mean something other than what they say. This has to be a mistake, she said, though her voice didn't have the certainty it usually carried. Natalie Pierce is a common enough name. This could be anyone. Denise. Grant said it quietly, almost gently. The way you'd correct someone you loved without wanting to embarrass them further. It's her photo. It's literally her face. A small crowd had started to gather near the dessert table, the way crowds do when they sense something has shifted but don't yet understand what. Carla was among them now, phone already out, scrolling to find the same article for herself. I saw her eyes widen slightly as the search results loaded. I've read about this company, Carla said slowly, half to herself. My sister-in-law works in tech in Seattle. She mentioned Pierce Analytics like 6 months ago. I had no idea that was you. I hadn't meant for it to come out this way. If I was honest with myself, some quiet part of me had always known a moment like this might happen eventually. That the two worlds I kept so carefully apart would eventually collide in someone's driveway on a Saturday evening. I just hadn't expected it to be Denise's husband holding the flashlight when it did. I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, I said, and I meant it. I never told anyone here what I do because I liked being just Natalie. Not Natalie who runs a company. Just the woman who brings brownies and waters her neighbors' plants when they're on vacation. Denise was quiet for a long moment, and something in her expression had changed from disbelief into something closer to shame, though she was clearly fighting not to let it show completely. I said some things, she started, then stopped, glancing at the small crowd around us before lowering her voice. About you working from home? I didn't mean, you meant exactly what you said, I told her, but without any heat in it. It's okay, Denise. I'm not upset. I just never corrected it because it never seemed worth the conversation. Brian appeared beside me then, having come out from wherever he'd wandered off to earlier, took one look at the phone still glowing in Grant's hand, and understood immediately what had happened. He didn't say anything, just rested a steady hand on my shoulder, the kind of quiet support that didn't need an audience to mean something. For what it's worth, Grant said, looking genuinely uncomfortable now, I think what you've built is incredible. 40 million in funding is no small thing. Thank you, I said. And I found that I meant that too. There wasn't any triumph in me watching Denise struggle to find her footing. Just a strange, quiet relief that the pretending, at least this particular kind, was finally over. Denise looked at me then, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in 2 years. Can we talk? Denise asked quietly. Just the two of us for a minute? I nodded, and we walked a little ways from the crowd, over toward the side yard where the noise of the party faded into the sound of cicadas starting up in the trees. She wrapped her arms around herself even though the evening was warm, and for a while she didn't say anything at all. I think I've spent 2 years deciding who you were without ever actually asking, she finally said. That's not fair to you. It wasn't fair the first time I did it, and it definitely wasn't fair tonight. In front of everyone. You don't have to apologize in some big way, I said. I could have told people what I do. I chose not to. That was my decision. Not something you're responsible for. Still, she said, I made a lot of assumptions about you because it was easier than getting to know you. I think maybe I felt a little insecure if I'm honest. You always seemed so put together. And I filled in the blanks with something that let me feel better about that. It wasn't the kind of apology I'd imagined. Back on the rare occasions I'd let myself imagine a moment like this. There was no dramatic reversal, no grand gesture. Just an ordinary woman standing in her side yard, admitting something honest for the first time in longer than either of us probably realized. I'd like to actually get to know you, she said, if you're open to that. Not the version of you I made up, the real one. I'd like that too, I said. And I meant it because holding on to 2 years of small comments didn't feel like something I wanted to carry into whatever came next on the street. We walked back toward the party together, and something in the air between us had genuinely shifted. Not fixed exactly, but started. Grant caught my eye from across the driveway and gave me a small, grateful nod, the kind between two people who'd just watched something quietly repair itself. Later that night, after the last string lights had been switched off and the folding chairs stacked away, Ryan and I sat on our own porch steps with the last of the lemonade between us. That was a big night, he said, bumping his shoulder gently against mine. It was, I agreed. I think I needed it more than I realized. I'd gotten so comfortable being invisible that I forgot how tiring it was to keep being small on purpose. You don't have to be small anymore if you don't want to, he said. I thought about that for a long moment, looking out at the quiet street, at the porch lights clicking on one by one along Maple Hollow. Maybe not, I said, but I think what I want isn't to be big either. I just want people to actually see me, however that looks. Down the street, a light came on in the Whitmore's kitchen window, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel the small, familiar tightness in my chest when I looked at it. Just the quiet, unremarkable feeling of a neighborhood finally starting to know itself a little more honestly.